Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Purivraja Gacharya Satara Sata Śrīmad. A divine grace of Bhayacharanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki. Dhaniti Leva Vishtom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Purivraja Gacharya Satara Sata Śrīmad. A divine grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Prabhupada ki. Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki. Gaur Premanandi. All glorious is some devotees. All glorious is some devotees. All glorious is some devotees. All glories to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, and Srila Prabhupada. Om Shivaya Krishna Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam something. Okay, before beginning Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, we'll read a little bit of Srila Prabhupada's Leelamrita, Volume 6, chapter titled, what's the chapter titled? Chant Hare Krishna and Fight. From the top of the page, Prabhupada says, unfortunately, you have no brain. Therefore, you misunderstand. On this point, the Bhagavad Gita will explain. What do you think? Brainwashing or brain giving? Yes, said Adhikeshwara, this is good. Prabhupada said that the devotees should consult among themselves, write an essay and send it to the court. This is every devotee. This was in 1976. There was a big legal case. We were up against the establishment, including one, at that time, notorious, whatever you want to call him, brainwasher, named Dave, what is his name? David Patrick? Ted Patrick. Ted Patrick. They would kidnap devotees and they would torture them. Torture means they would force them to eat meat, watch pornography, try to break their vows. Yeah? And in this way, some devotees were lost. Just imagine if you were in that situation. Your parents hired some guy to take you to some place, not your home, just some place. You were being under guard 24 hours a day. And they were constantly watching you. They were doing the same thing they accused us of, sleep deprivation, like this. No peace. Blast rock and roll music at you all the time. Like I said, don't give you any food except things that would break the four regulative principles. Yeah? Very terrible situation. His main point was that most people cannot understand the simple truth of the soul. They are in need of knowledge, and the Krishna conscious movement is giving essential knowledge of the soul. Therefore, it is a brain-giving movement. Adhikeshwara took the role of the antagonist. Well, he said, I have a brain, and it is functioning. Otherwise, how could I be speaking to you now? How could I even answer you? But that speaking and the dog's barking are the same thing, said Prabhupada. The dog is barking. What is the difference? He is speaking in a different language, that's all. The dog is barking and you are speaking. What is the difference? Adhikeshwara. But they say we have art, we have science. Whatever you may have, Prabhupada replied, you cannot answer the ultimate question. Arguments flew back and forth as other devotees in the room challenged Prabhupada's logic. But Prabhupada stuck to his main point. If a man doesn't know the difference between a dead man and a living man, if he doesn't know the soul, then he has no brain. When the devotees mentioned faith in Scripture, Prabhupada said that he was not arguing on the basis of Scripture, but on logic. Whatever arguments they raised, Srila Prabhupada strongly defeated. There was no trace of illness or weakness in Prabhupada's demeanor, as he drilled his men on how to defend by aggressive argument. Aggressive argument. They say that this discussion is beyond their intelligence, said Adhikeshwara. If you say beyond your intelligence, said Srila Prabhupada, that means you have no brain. In Prabhupada's association, Adhikeshwara gained strength and conviction. He was the GBC at the time, so he was in charge of making sure that the case was properly attended to. They complained to Adhikeshwara that if one becomes a devotee, he suffers from loss of identity. But actually, they don't know who they are. So we will challenge them like that. What is this loss of identity? You don't even know who you are. So you have nothing to lose. Yes, said Prabhupada with great spirit. What is your identification? That they do not know. We are teaching that by identifying yourself with this body, you have lost your identity. Most of their charges, said Adhikeshava, are based on misconceptions about our movement. For instance, they say that we do not eat enough or sleep enough. Yet we have studies from their own scientists that say our diet is good. Srila Prabhupada, how are we living if our diet is not good? 10 years we are eating insufficiently, and how are we living? You do not know what is good food, but the result you have to know. A cow eats so much grass, and a human being eats a small plateful. If a cow says, you are not eating sufficiently like me, what is that logic? No, said Adhikeshava, it is not logic. Prabhupada, so you are just like cows and asses. You eat voraciously. Does it mean that I have to eat voraciously? But what proof is there? Asked Tamal Krishna Goswami. They may argue for proof of the soul. This is proof, Srila Prabhupada said. Now if the real active principle is left, if you can understand it, then replace it. Replace life. If you cannot, then you have no brain. Prabhupada argued that at death, although the parts of the body remained, something was missing. But you have not seen that something, said Tamal Krishna. See it or not, said Prabhupada, I can see why this man is dead. Something is missing. Well, said Tamal Krishna, it's just like a machine. Srila Prabhupada became fiery. A machine you can replace. Why don't you bring a new body and replace the dead one? Therefore, you have no brain. It is a completely different thing. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 3rd canto, 5th chapter, text 31. Text 31 is a couplet. Not even a couplet. Technically, it's only one line. Taijasantriyanyeva. Taijasanindriyanyeva. Jnana karma mayanicha. Jnana karma mayanicha. Dajasanindriyanyeva. Jnana karma mayanicha. Dajasanindriyanyeva. Jnana karma mayanicha. Please chant. Nivya Veva Jnanachama Mayanicha Tajasanindriyanyeva Jnanakarma Mayanicha Tajasanindriyanyeva Jnanakarma Mayanicha. Tajasanindriyanyeva. Jnanakarma Mayanicha. Tajasanindriyanyeva. Jnanakarma Mayanicha. Anyone else? Taijasani, the mode of passion, Indriyani, the senses, Eva, certainly, Jnana, knowledge, philosophical speculations. So it's two definitions. Jnana means knowledge and philosophical speculations. Karma, fruit of activities. Mayani, predominating. Cha, also. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The senses are certainly products of the modes of passion in false ego, and therefore philosophical speculative knowledge and fruit of activities are predominantly products of the mode of passion. Please repeat. The senses are certainly products of the mode of passion in false ego, and therefore philosophical speculative knowledge and fruit of activities are predominantly products of the mode of passion. Purport. The chief function of the false ego is godlessness. When a person forgets his constitutional position as an eternally subordinate part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and wants to be happy independently, he functions mainly in two ways. He first attempts to act fruitively for personal gain or sense gratification. And after attempting such fruitive activities for a considerable time, when he is frustrated, he becomes a philosophical speculator and thinks himself to be on the same level as God. This false idea of becoming one with the Lord is the last snare of the illusory energy, which traps a living entity into the bondage of forgetfulness under the spell of false ego. The best means of liberation from the clutches of false ego is to give up the habit of philosophical speculation regarding the absolute truth. One should know definitely that the absolute truth is never realized by the philosophical speculations of the imperfect, egoistic person. The absolute truth, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is realized by hearing about Him in all submission and love from a bona fide authority who is a representative of the 12 great authorities mentioned in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. By such an attempt only can one conquer the illusory energy of the Lord, although for others she is unsurpassable, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 7:14. What's that verse, Chaitanya? 7:14? Daivi yeshu gunamaya mama maya dharatya. Om Jnana Tamarandasya Garanjana Slakaya Chakshur Mulatamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bangum Langai Degaram Yakipatamaham Bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. It's amazing how Srila Prabhupada is able to condense so many seemingly opposing concepts in one purport. In general, the living entity has no knowledge of the soul. He basically doesn't even understand the difference between his mind and his intelligence. The only voice he hears continuously, constantly, is the mind, basically on a continuous feedback loop, regurgitating whatever he has seen or heard or experienced in a relatively short span of his lifetime. It's a fact that people, especially in the marketing industry, study subliminal messaging. For many years it was a trade secret that they would deny was taking place. But embedded in so many different, especially with the advent of the medium of television, they would inject certain images imperceptible to the consciousness, but perceptible to the subconscious. So this was the same essential technique that Maya is performing on a regular daily basis. Everyone in the material world is completely in bondage. They have a saying that the jail which is impossible to escape is the one in which you don't know you're in. Yeah, you don't make any attempt to escape. You're completely bewildered by the fact that somehow or other I am shackled so severely, but yet I can't realize it. And therefore there's no attempt to escape. Just like this illusion. There's many philosophers who have studied this phenomena. Going back to the Greeks, to the Romans, they had so many analogies about this. The so-called shadow people. Who's heard that concept? I'm sure, yes, of course. You don't understand it, you don't even realize it, but you think that what is being projected is reality. And everything is shaped by that misconception. Your whole existence. Just like that movie, The Matrix. Right? Nowadays, people don't study philosophy. They don't study Socrates or Plato or any of the classic. Because nothing is new under the sun. This has all been examined in different ways. I think we could have two people in here. Such opulence. Raghavinda ki jai. So when one is put into that situation, so here we see that verse that Prabhupada quotes at the end, Daivi Shagunamayi Mama Maya Daraktaya. This material energy is very difficult to overcome. But one who is surrendered to me can easily cross beyond it. But why is that? Why is that? What is the difference? What does surrender give the devotee that the general population cannot perceive, they cannot access? It's just like in material affairs. When you begin to work for some enterprise, you start off at a very low level. And they give you a password. Along with that password, you have access to a certain level within the company's computers. But you cannot go beyond that because you're just a peon. You're just at the low level. The next level, the manager, his password is an administrative password level 1. And he can access something else. Something more secure, sensitive data. And in this way, you go on and on until you get to the so-called top, where the chief executive officer, he has access to the entire realm of corporate data. He sees everything. Even though all these people are in the same company, there's a big difference between that person at the lowest level and that person at the highest level. So this is also described. We have that understanding. What is knowledge? Who gets that opportunity? Samo damo tapaso chom. What is that verse, Chaitanya? These are the qualities. What does it mean? Jnanam brigyanam sayitam, brahma karma subhavajam. These are the qualities by which a brahmana works. Sometimes Prabhupada would add in front, if you hear Prabhupada quote this verse, he would always say, Satyam samodamo tapaso cham. So he would make it 9 instead of 8. Satyam samodama socham brahma karma subhavajam. So in this way, so what is the main point in that? Okay, there's honesty, there's cleanliness, samo damo, there's tolerance. Tapa, there's austerity. Right? Jnanam, big jnanam. Jnanam and big jnanam. Here we're speaking about knowledge and realized knowledge, like what Prabhupada was saying in Lilamrita. And also here, philosophical speculative knowledge, all based on the false ego. An incorrect premise cannot lead to a correct conclusion. It's not possible. You have a mathematical, sometimes you've seen in the movies, you'll have someone performing mathematical calculations across an entire wall, maybe 4 walls, because that's how it works. And they continue to carry it on. Whatever the variables are, they pursue that, and it branches off. Eventually, they hope to reach the solution. But if they make one mistake, then everything that follows that mistake is incorrect. It may have everything in the correct protocol. They're doing their multiplication, they're doing their exponential, everything is there. But because they made a mistake early on in the equation, it can never be correct. The conclusion will escape them. Even though they think they're so smart, they have such a command. So there's one mistake in the material world. What is that? And I am this body. I am this body. And the aphorism in the Bhagavatam, in the Vedanta Sutra, Aham Brahmasmi. Aham Brahmasmi. The first thing the devotee realizes, I am not this body. Neither I am anything related to this body. I am not somebody's husband or father or brother. These things are all illusory. They're temporary, for this one lifetime only. And even then, these relationships are not permanent. Once family members die, and so what is that relationship? Simply memories. Prabhupada writes famous poem, Vrindavan Bhajan. And he says, where are these people? Simply a list of names. Where is mother? Where is father? Where is brother? Where is it? Nobody's there. Everyone has ceased to exist except by some memory. Even a snapshot. It just captures a point in time. But it is not eternal. We have so many snapshots of dead people. But what is the benefit there? What does one gain from this association? Yet the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared 5,000 years ago. And what is the difference? Because he is Satchidananda Vigraha, eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. This is the nature of the soul. When we understand that, we can understand where to place our affection, our love, our faith in that which is eternal. What is that verse? It'll come to me. No? I'll think of it. Where the sages have determined that which has no substance. Nasato vidite bhavo nabhavo vidite satak. Ubayopi drishtontas tvanios tattvadarshana. Because they have seen the nature of both. So they understand what is permanent and what is temporary. Nasato vidite bhavo nabhavo vidite satak. They understand. So who can see the nature of both? Only those who have knowledge of matter and spirit. And therefore there is no knowledge without that complete appreciation of the sum total. The absolute truth is not just one-sided. It's Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan Iti Shabdite. He's seen in 3 phases of existence. 3 phases. So one has to know all 3 phases. Tadanti tat tatvavidat tatvam yaj jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti Bhagavan iti shabdite. Bhagavan iti shabdite. So if you just see one aspect, it's like sometimes, someone wants to buy something and he goes online shopping and he picks something out and then he gets it and he's disappointed. Why? Because he could only see it from a two-dimensional, somebody's faulty description. He couldn't appreciate it in 3D, in reality. So he's disappointed because he could only see one aspect. And many people are accepting these sub-religious principles, thinking that God is all-pervading or that God is only this or God is only that. But they don't have a complete understanding of God. Therefore, they have a kamanasasti. There's no laws of diminution. They can make a little advancement. But Krishna says, Naham prakasha svabhasya yoga maya samanvataha. He doesn't have to reveal himself. Why? Because there's no submissiveness. Tadvidi panipatena pariprashnena seve upadekshotitega. Jnananyas tatpadarshana. One has to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, self-realized soul, and rendering submissive service, not just some begrudging service. I have to do this, I have to do that. Because if I want to live in a temple, I have to do 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. No. That is not the key to unlock Sarvasya chaham hridisana vishtoma taksmatiya jnanamaponam cha. Krishna says, I am seated in the heart of all living entities. And from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. But why does one person forget and one person remember? What is that? What is the key? What is the key? But can we approach Krishna directly? Yes, as you surrender unto me, I reward you accordingly. But how do we surrender to Krishna? I don't know who is Krishna. How do I surrender? I have to have some interaction. I'm not so advanced. Some people think that they can speak directly to Krishna. You see it in India all the time. Some actually can, of course. There are such pure devotees. And it's been related to us. We see great souls, they talk to their deities. We saw in the witness Gopal, Sakshi Gopal. What was the famous line? A very funny line, the way Prabhupada translated it. The Brahmin went to the deity and he asked the deity to be his witness. And he said, you have to come to my village. And the deity said, how can I come to your village? I cannot walk. What did the Brahmin say? The Brahmin said, if you can talk, you can walk. Right? Krishna has a sense of humor, as do his devotees. But he gave him a command. He said, but if you turn around and look at me, at that point I'd stop. I don't move. So he could only listen to the ankle bells on Krishna's feet. Kunda. And then he knew Krishna was... But all of a sudden, at one point, he stopped hearing the ankle bells. And he turned around and there was the deity, Sakshi Gopal. So Krishna can do anything according to our appreciation, the intensity of our devotion. The intensity. If we're intense about any aspect of our devotional service, if you're intense about washing the pots, if you're intense about your deity service, if you're intense about your book distribution, you will realize Krishna to that degree that your sincerity manifests in that intensity. Sometimes you see a person, they have a term, it's called half-hearted. Half-hearted. They have other terms. on the street. But that will suffice. When you see a person and he's doing something half-heartedly, he's not putting any effort into it. He's just going through the motions. Right? Isn't that what they say? He's just going through the motions. He's not concerned about the result. He doesn't care. He doesn't appreciate the connection. He doesn't appreciate the connection. Man mana bhava mad bhakto mad dyabji mam naraskuru. Mami vaishasi satyam te prati jana piyosine. One has to endeavor with some determination. He has to be submissive. Bowing down means submissive. Always thinking of Krishna means submissive. Krishna says, always think of me. Okay. Let me always think of Krishna. How do I do that? I think, how can I serve Krishna nicely in whatever I'm doing? If I'm washing the pots, let me think how I can clean these pots nicely. How can I dress Krishna nicely? How can I sweep the floor nicely? This is Krishna consciousness. This is not some mundane, mechanical thought process. I have to think. I have to relate that this is Krishna's temple. I should do it very nicely. If I see something dirty, I should want to clean it. Of course, we go through this all the time. This is the only reason that Prabhupada established these temples. And the devotee asked, why? Why do we have these temples? Prabhupada said, so that we can make devotees. Because here is where you come for purification. Rishikesha Rishikena Sevanam Bhakti Uchite. Where you engage your senses in the service of Rishikesh, the master of the senses. This doesn't happen outside. The people who are sweeping the street outside, they're not making any advancement in spiritual life. There's no connection. There's no connection. Yoga means to connect. Yoga doesn't mean to sit erect in certain postures, stare at the tip of the nose with half-closed eyes, and sleep during Bhagavatam class. No. It doesn't mean that. Yoga means to connect. And Prabhupada has given us this sublime process, which begins with the chanting of the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. This is the ultimate test. How much taste you develop for chanting the holy name. You know, we see that many people will become dry scholars. They'll come in contact with Krishna consciousness, but they'll become distracted by it all has a relationship to Krishna. But on this level of philosophical speculation that Prabhupada is cautioning us against. Because we're not understanding the essence. If you're studying something, you should know what is the ultimate goal. Sambandha, Abhideya, Pariyojan. And what is that Pariyojan? Prema Pumartha Mahan. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said these three things must be understood in order to make spiritual advancement. If one does not understand those in relationship to his adosha, tata, sadhu, sangha, bhajanakri, then he cannot gauge his progress. And he will become disappointed or discouraged. He will mistake the austerity of spiritual life for material hardship. There was one nice, I was reading, Prabhupada was in New Vrindavan in 1972. So Prabhupada was giving some very special. New Vrindavan was known as being austere. When you wanted to take bath in the morning in the winter, you had to break the ice in order to put your bucket in. They didn't have immersion heaters. So Prabhupada said, this is the relative world, and we should know that what has happened in this world is not worthy of consideration in terms of universal affairs. As human beings, we live for some time, say for 100 years. But there are demigods who can live for millions of years, and an ant will live for only a few hours. So this is relative, but time is eternal. And what is happening in so-called human history has no consideration from the viewpoint of eternal time. That is all relative. If there is some catastrophe in ant society, the ants may be very much concerned, but human society does not take any notice of it. Similarly, if a catastrophe occurs in human society, the demigods, who are higher than us, do not consider it. Some birds or cats or dogs may be fighting, and for them it may be a catastrophe. But for us, it is nothing. This is the relative world, and we should know that what has happened in this world is not worthy of consideration in terms of universal affairs. Things are coming and going like seasonal changes. Arjuna put this question to Krishna. This is a catastrophe. I have to kill my own men. Although Arjuna believed this to be a catastrophe, Krishna likened it to seasonal changes. Matchaksparshasta konteya sitoshna sukadukada. Bhagavad Gita 2:14. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. The rest of the verses. They rise from sense perception, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. In the winter season, water is not very pleasant. But in the summer it is very pleasing. What then is the condition of water? Is it pleasing or not? The water is the same, but in touch with our skin, it becomes pleasing or not according to the climatic circumstances. Just because the summer is hot, should I give up cooking? Work must be done. Similarly, just because water is cold in the winter, should I give up my bath? No, these things may come and go, but we have to do our duty. Our duty is Krishna consciousness, and that is our philosophy, and that is an actual fact. These seasonal changes may come and go in life. Sometimes they may please us, and sometimes they may pinch us. But our duty in human life is to understand God. We shouldn't care for all these catastrophes that come and go. We should have no concern, for their nature is like that, sometimes pleasing and sometimes not pleasing. Despite all this, we have to do our duty, understand God. Srila Prabhupada ki. So I think that sums it up. We'll read the verse again. The false ego is transformed into mind by interaction with the mode of goodness. Oh, that's 30. Text 31. The senses are certainly products of the mode of passion and false ego, and therefore philosophical speculative knowledge and fruitive activities are predominantly products of the mode of passion. Predominantly. So there may be some exceptions, but predominantly the mode of passion. Any questions? Yes, Bishop. Do you need the microphone? You just have to speak loud for me.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. Thank you for the lecture. I was just wondering about what you said about Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. Did you say that we should understand that in connection to the 9 limbs of devotional service? Was that what you said?
Say that one more time. Which?
I was wondering if what you said was that it understand Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana in connection with the 9 limbs.
That's what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said. As far as grasping those concepts was the secret to understanding spiritual life related to our line of, bhakti. Because if I don't know, first of all, if I don't know who am I, then how can I act? If I don't know who is God, how can I act? If I don't know what my relationship with God is, how can I act? So if these two things, Sambandha and Abhideya, are not understood in the correct context, one may think, you see, many cults, and I use this word carefully, they're fixed on a personality whom they can see, and for whatever reason, due to circumstances, maybe there's some charisma, maybe there's some tiny mystic power, people will become enamored because they don't know who is God. And so there are huge followings of people in India who follow such personalities. They don't follow Krishna. They follow this person, they follow this Baba, this guru, this person, that person, because they don't know who am I and who is God. So they are lost. Before they even begin their real spiritual life, they are lost because they could not grasp that. And of course, this is the cheaters, because they're not giving them the information. Instead of telling them, you must worship Krishna, they're saying, no, you, quite all right, you can worship me. Because that person is thinking that I'm as good as God. Just like it says, the last snare of Maya. So these people have made this conclusion, and because these foolish people are worshiping them, they even think more and more that, yes, I'm something special. Big, huge temples in India, all based on this false premise, misunderstanding. And what is you see that in our International Society for Krishna Consciousness, we have no temples which is dedicated to a personality. We have Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi, which is a memorial. No one is mistaking this for a temple. No one is thinking that Srila Prabhupada was God. Srila Prabhupada is the spiritual master, representative of God. He's as good as God, just like the ambassador of a country is accepted as the ambassador, as the representative, of the head of state. And he's given all respect and honor that you would give to that head of state. But he is not the head of state. He is the representative. So we understand this. Fortunately, we have Srila Prabhupada's, how can you say, it's an encyclopedia of knowledge to guide us. And if one is serious and sincere, he will never be mistaken or illusioned or bewildered or without the ability to find the answers to whatever question he has. But he has to have that desire to seek the answer. If I give you a book and say that the answer to all your questions is here, but you don't open it, you don't read it, and you say, no, I'll keep laboring uselessly on my own. All right? Just like a person, if you give him a box of money and say there's $1 million inside, but he cannot see it, he has to open the box. There are so many analogies like this. Prabhupada uses the analogy of the jar of honey. If you can see the honey, but if you lick the outside of the jar, you cannot get any of the sweetness. You have to open the jar. You have to open the box to access the money. You have to open the book to access the knowledge. Very simple concepts to us. But due to false ego, people will not go beyond their mental limitation, because they will have to accept that, therefore, I do not know everything. They will have to accept that I am deficient. And everyone is too busy thinking that he is God or he is superior. Right? The whole material world is an attempt to try to make oneself superior and make others inferior. So there can not be any happiness or satisfaction unless one understands that Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. When he understands that the ultimate goal is love of God, and we discussed earlier, that then I can understand that I can put my love in God and I will never be disappointed, because He will never abandon me, He will never die, He will never betray me. And this is not said out of frustration. People sometimes accuse us, so you're just frustrated. You've had bad experience in the material world. Yes, maybe so. But we learn from that bad experience. What does the materialist say? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Right? So don't be fooled again. I even made a song about it. So this is our offering in this particular month. It's a common saying, better to give than to receive, right? And everyone knows that when you give, you feel better. When you give somebody something, you get more satisfaction than actually receiving. Because that is our nature. Our nature is to be generous, to be loving, to be sharing. But because we have had so many bad experiences, we restrict that. We're afraid of rejection. Nobody wants to be rejected. So therefore, they're very stingy. They become miserly. They don't give their love, they don't give their wealth, they don't give their knowledge, they don't share. People have become so jaded. So we have the opportunity to benedict all these fallen conditioned souls during this Christmas marathon. Everyone is in the mood to give and receive. So we're giving them a gift. What do the karmis say? Give the gift that keeps on giving. There's nothing like it. You give these books and they benefit innumerable people besides yourself. We've seen it happen over and over again. We've seen people just come in contact by accident and how it's changed their life. And nothing mundane can accomplish the same thing. You can do so many self-help books. But if you don't know who you are, what is the question of this self-help? What is that self that you're helping? It's all the false ego. You're thinking, I'm a man, or I'm a woman, or I'm a businessman, or I'm a businesswoman. So all this self-help is based on the bodily concept of life. So it cannot really help you. So let us accept the essential talks between Vidura and Maitreya, these great souls. And what did Maitreya's exclamation is that you have brought these questions which will benefit the entire world. And that same theme is repeated in the questions by the sages at the beginning of the first canto. It is the same purport. In all these exchanges, these questions and answers are meant to benefit the people in general. They're not just between Vidura and Maitreya. Because here we are, how many thousands of years, 5,000 years later, getting the benefit of this discussion. 5,000 years. So we're very fortunate to have this. I was speaking to some guests last night. No one understands how special the parampara is that have carefully preserved this transcendental knowledge and a chain of unbroken transmission. Evam parampara praptim imam rajasyo viduhu. The saintly kings understood it in that way. And now we are getting the same benefit. The same benefit. Carefully preserved by the, we see that how Sanskrit is such a perfect medium for the transmission of knowledge because it's so constructed that it defies adulteration. If anyone tries to give some forgery, it's very easily seen. Scientific. Sanskrit is the oldest and the most scientific. It is a complete language. It has everything to communicate every concept in philosophy, science, every discipline. Only Sanskrit can accomplish all of these. Some languages are good for some things, some languages are good for other things. Only Sanskrit is good for everything. Any other questions? Yes, Arjunananda. Loud.
Hare Krishna, thank you for the class. I have a maybe silly question, but just for clarification, when they say Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagwaniti, so does it mean that the one mentioned is more complete form of the previous one? Like Paramatma includes Brahman and Bhagwan includes the other two, or is it like three separate aspects?
That was my understanding from hearing Prabhupada's relation in that each one is progressive. And I'm sure His Grace Krishna Kripa could elaborate if he wanted to.
Sometimes it's said that the Brahman just has the eternality, and Paramatma is eternality and knowledge, and Bhagavan is eternality, knowledge, and bliss.
I mean, there's also that, how it relates specifically, but Sat Chit Ananda, one understands, even the germ has some concept, Anamoy, Gyanamoy, Vijnanamoy, right? So my grandmother's name was Anamoy, literally. So what is my fate?
I had a couple small comments. When you were talking about that half-hearted devotional service, during the Prabhupada disappearance program here, the Adi Purushi told one story. There was a devotee named Chakravarti.
Chakravarti, I know Chakravarti.
And he tells how as a college student he came to the temple in Berry Place for the first time, and the devotees asked him to do some service, to clean the stairs. So he was sort of proud. He was a college student. What am I doing? So he was just doing it a little bit, And then the little girl, Saraswati, came bouncing up the stairs and saw him just doing that, and said, "That's not how you serve Krishna." And she got really into it. And he was impressed and thought, even the children have picked up this service of the spirit of service to Krishna.
Krishna consciousness. It's the difference between half-hearted and full-hearted. If he doesn't know that I'm trying to please Krishna, if he doesn't know that I'm the servant of Krishna, then of course he'll do it only as well as he's been experienced in his material affairs. He won't go the extra effort to take it to the next level. And unfortunately that, sometimes devotees also get stuck at a certain point. They think, I've been chanting for 50 years and, I should know my eternal constitutional position by now. Am I a gopi? Am I a creeper? What am I? What is my siddha deha? But no, this is not, probably completely smashed that idea, that premature desire. Who's to say? If we think honestly, then no one will try to claim that I am eligible for such situation. And as soon as he thinks he is, he becomes ineligible. Because it is that which is awarded by the spiritual master. And we've seen that in Chaitanya Charitamrita, how many times? Dukhi Krishna, so many things, so many examples of persons who engage in service without looking for any reciprocation, simply to perform the service. But then Krishna within the heart connects the two, and they can understand that, yes, this person has been doing this service. So the spiritual master knows. You don't have to tell him. He knows. This is the unique attribute that the spiritual, that you become linked. But if you think that you're not linked, that somehow or other, I have just gotten this name and I don't know who this person is and I have no connection, then you don't understand the transcendental science of Tadvidi Pranipatena. You've linked. But you have to, just like the Bhakti Lata beads, you have to nourish that connection with sincere service. You have to nourish that connection continuously, not just when you're in the presence of that person. That's just for show. Many devotees we used to see would kind of come to Prabhupada and make a show. Prabhupada, see what I have done. See how nicely I've done this and done that. But Prabhupada is not fooled by such childish, attempts to fool the spiritual master by some show of devotion. No. Don't be show bottle. Don't just do devotional service when the temple commander is looking. You should do devotional service with your heart and soul. Every moment should be how I can please Krishna with whatever it is at that particular moment. It could just be thinking, I need to purchase bhoga for the deities. That consciousness of how to serve Krishna, that is Krishna consciousness. It is not that I'm thinking of the Rasa Leela 24/7, and how Krishna is in between every gopi, and how that's there. That will come. We understand these things. We read Krishna book. We know what is there. And we pray. Every morning we pray to Srimati Tulsi Maharani. May I always swim in the love of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. Yes, Radha Govinda. We pray like that. So that is our prayer. But at the same time, we engage in practical devotional service. And practical doesn't mean material. Practical means with my senses. Rishikesha, Rishikena, Sevanam, Bhakti Uchate. So we have to understand that. That's a subtle point. But it is the difference between success and failure in spiritual life. Understanding who I am. If I am a servant, then I must serve. That is my identity. It is who I am. It is why I wear these kunti malas. It's why I keep the sika. It's why we put on tilak. It's why we go out dressed in dhoti and kurta. Any other questions, comments?
I just had one
more
thing
comment?
Your classes awaken in me like remembrance of this really nice one in the CC. You're talking about how the love of God increases when we give it. There's this verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Although the members of the Panchatattva plundered the storehouse of love of Godhead and ate and distributed its contents, there was no scarcity, for this wonderful storehouse is so complete that as the love is distributed, the supply increases hundreds of times. Yeah.
reminds me, people are always trying to claim something more. So I saw a new sign on the road to Delhi when I was driving to the airport. And it used to be that everywhere you'd see the dāba, dāba means some roadside stall. And it would say 100% veg. I say, no, some people like vegetarian food. You know, and those which don't say that, you understand that they're serving some meat. And now there's a new sign that says 140% veg. 140%, which is meaningless, technically. 100% is 100%. What does 140% mean? But someone's thinking this is a good marketing ploy, so they're advertising like that. And it catches your eye. Any other questions, comments? Arjuna Nand, one last question. Last one.
Many a times it is seen that regarding half-hearted service, when a devotee gets a service which is not according to his nature, like suppose someone likes to study, for him to speak classes or to study or write assignments, those may be easier because he's more jnani type. Or someone who is more like, he likes physical services. So if someone asks him to do some study of books, then he finds it very difficult. So how can we see this? Because even though a devotee doesn't want to do half-hearted service, but when it is given not according to his nature, that half-heartedness just seeps in. So how can a devotee overcome that?
The difference between sincerity and you can say gyan, is knowledge. That if one remains on that platform of superficial knowledge, whether in devotional service or some other aspect of it, then his ability to make the correct conclusion that service is service, like Prabhupada said many times, whether one is washing the pots, distributing books, or serving on the altar, it is all the same. So we don't try to engage someone against his nature, but we see that the benefit for many people is that they must come out of their preconceived preconception, misconceived misconceptions. Because this is all a function of the false ego. If he's thinking, I cannot do this, how is it? That means he has no faith in Krishna? That Krishna can empower him? I mean, if Prabhupada thought that I'm a sadhu, I'm a baba, I'm retired in Vrindavan, I no longer have to pursue the instruction of my spiritual master to preach to the English. I can preach to the English-speaking people in India. I can write books right here. But Prabhupada saw, after years of effort in India, that there was no success printing in English, speaking in English, trying to capture. There was no success. So we could understand that I have to do something else in this regard. And he understood that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had previously sent his men to London. And after 3 years, they came back without any success. Only great expense. No success and great expense. So Prabhupada could understand how important it was that for 3 years, they bore all the expense of these sannyasis living in London. And very costly. It's not like living in a village in West Bengal. Very expensive in the 1930s to send them there by ship, rent some house, pay for all their expenses, and no success. So Prabhupada understood that my spiritual master wants us to preach. But there was no success in London. So therefore, he went to New York. And we see what is the result. So you have to judge a thing by the results. Palam parachiyate. That is the key. So, some people, Prabhupada said, yes, send them to the plow department. Some people who cannot follow the strict regimen, let them engage in some service someplace, according to their capacity. Right? Maybe they will only plow the fields. They won't come to program, they won't chant, they won't do, maybe they'll do a little something, maybe. But they're engaged under the guidance of the temple authorities. They will make some advancement. And some will become completely transformed after being put into that situation, because they engage in such a way that Krishna, their hearts are purified, and Krishna, Sarvasya Chaham Hridayasana, he manifests. And then they become great elevated yogis, even though they started off in the plow department. That happened many times in New Vrindavan. New Vrindavan was such a place, whenever someone wasn't fit for service in the city, we would give them a bus ticket and send them to New Vrindavan. It was a common situation. Because sometimes hard work is what is required for purification. A person's mind is so strong. But Krishna can purify anything, just like the sun can purify a filthy place. Krishna is so powerful. But there has to be some degree of sincerity. You have to submit yourself. Just like you submit yourself to the doctor. When you're sick, I don't know what's wrong, I go to the doctor. I submit. And he says, yes, you take this, you take this, you take this. I'm not the authority, but the doctor. I accept the authority of the doctor. Not in every case. That's just a simple analogy. We don't blindly follow anyone. We have to take prasadam because we have to go distribute books. Right? So where are we going today? We're just going to distribute books here, or are we going outside?
We may go to Union Square subway.
Very good. That's the key. Utsayan nishchaya dharya tat tat karma pravartana. Enthusiasm is the first ingredient. So if a person has enthusiasm, then it doesn't matter what other limitations he has. The enthusiasm will overcome that. Utsaha nishchaya dharya. It is progressive, just like Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan Iti Shabdite. Those are also progressive. Prabhupada said, even if you don't want to dance, dance, and the bliss will come. Because that is the nature of spirit. It is not dependent on any so-called material concept or inhibition. Just do it. Dance for the pleasure of the deities. Dance because you know it'll please the spiritual master. You know? What did Prabhupada say? Make me dance, make me dance, make me dance as you like. Such a great soul in humble submission. And what did that humble submission achieve? It achieved everything. Everything. Krishna was going to do it anyway. Prabhupada was just acting as that instrument. But his example is there for everyone. If someone says, no, I cannot do that. No, wait. We have the example of an elderly sadhu at 70 years crossing the ocean and living like a mendicant on the streets of New York. In the freezing winter, wearing plastic shoes lined with cardboard. So we should not forget, who we're serving. And then we should always take pride in doing the right thing to please that person. Because we cannot go wrong in that respect. That is the key. You cannot go wrong. So we should